You yourself are a lawyer and a human rights activist in India, and we understand, as spoken, a lot of these issues are across borders, they're everywhere, and especially the issue of harassment, of rape, of blaming the survivors is rampant. So we'd be interested to hear, the issues that you really see in the mainstream narratives. And I'm also interested to hear of how media representation of such cases has evolved over time. Because, we all grew up watching Bollywood and we saw a lot of very ridiculous songs that we sang as kids. And when you grow older, you realize that this is rape culture. This is literally like forcing a woman into acts that she doesn't want by a hero who's charming and who's chasing her, and in the end she gives up, and that's like, the biggest Bollywood hit. And then millions of people are watching this, and this behavior becomes normalized. So I'm interested to, hear about the evolution of representation of such issues in the media. And then also as a lawyer, what legal reforms have taken place in recent years that are good to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone. And once again, I'm glad that I'm able to join online and be part of this conversation. It's indeed very good to join a panel with Rakshanda and others who one has known. And I wish we were all together, but another time, I'm sure. Coming to the topic here, which is, of course, of great interest and an area that I passionately work in. And as you very rightly observed, the issue of how cultural stereotypes shape our way of understanding and thinking. And those cultural stereotypes don't actually stop at the doors of the police station or even the courtroom. And while it is very true and correct, and as the ambassador pointed out, we are dealing with the global issue of gender-based violence and violence against women, particularly sexual violence. And at least as far as some research that I have done shows that the laws in South Asia today are perhaps in many ways far ahead of even perhaps laws in the European continent. And I think it's important to underline here that these reforms and changes have come in the law because of a very strong women's movements across India and in many parts of the South Asian region. And those changes have come in the face of the women's movements asking for changes in law, taking to the streets, taking to courts, particularly when confronted with a social system that looks upon women as subordinate, even though the Constitution gives us equal rights, both whether in civil, political, or other rights. It's been a challenge moving this forward. The notion of stereotypes about women, where the issue of consent, as you said in Bollywood's music, songs, romances, is totally missing. The woman's consent is neither sought nor asked for. And the only person who seems to have agency in that narrative, in that sequence, is actually the man. So the woman is denied any identity or sexuality or agency. And therefore, eventually, it becomes, as is the name of this conference, a challenge to her dignity. And countering this notion of rape stereotypes and stereotypes about women is the role of law, which then changes the normative standards within which interactions and interface between men and women is to be understood. I think one of the biggest challenge, particularly for sexual harassment, has been to make it to be understood as a wrong, whether it is to be understood as a misconduct and therefore a workplace wrong, a civil wrong, or a criminal offense. In India, sexual harassment is also an offense under the Indian Penal Code, pursuant to the criminal law reforms of 2013, which came on the back of a huge protest by women's groups, youth groups, young people who took to the streets demanding justice. and legal reforms in the face of the very brutal gang rape of a young woman in Delhi, who finally succumbed to her injuries. Uh, the idea that sexual harassment is a wrong is an ongoing project, I'm sure, in all places, as Rakshanda has pointed out to us. We see in workplaces where you are asked, what is the harm that is caused to her? What is she complaining about? And that is really where you have to go down to the essence of the dignity. And as was pointed out earlier, even through a judgment given by the Indian Supreme Court called Vishakha and others versus State of Rajasthan in 1997, the notion that what conduct is unwelcome, it is unwelcome to the woman, and therefore it is a wrong. And therefore, this kind of behavior should not be accepted, tolerated, or allowed. And it becomes the responsibility and the duty of the employer to ensure that that conduct is not repeated. And it directly impacts on a woman's the productivity with which she works, and her peace of mind and her dignity with which she works. So there continues to be, while we have systems in place, there continues to be a challenge to ensure that sexual harassment is seen as a wrong and is taken up by all workplaces and educational institutions and other institutions as an issue that they need to engage with and put preventative as well as remedial mechanisms in place. Jumping back to the topic of stereotypes, I think this is a very important issue, particularly for the South Asian region. We see that stereotypes about women as well as stereotypes about the raped woman persist, and they tend to overwhelm both the investigating agency as well as very often judicial decisions. And we are at a juncture where at least, and I speak only for India, there is a challenge to this kind of stereotyping, that these are myths. And for instance, there is when a trial takes place, the main challenge that seems to be is how do you move the attention of the investigating agency, the prosecution and judicial adjudication from the character of the woman survivor, to the conduct of the accused. Because what is the subject of investigation and adjudication is the conduct of the accused, whether he has committed an offense. However, the entire focus seems to be on the character of the woman. Was she drinking? What kind of clothes was she wearing? With whom was she socializing? What hour of the day or night was she out? And so the whole, we are embroiled still in looking at the character of the woman, which is not what either the rape offense is about or any other sexual violence is about. And that is the shift that I think we are in the process of transitioning to. Courts in India, particularly the Supreme Court, in a very important judgment in 2021, has actually underlined this aspect of how these stereotypes should not be allowed to enter the judicial process, and has very interestingly, and I'll just read out a couple of them, has actually almost laid down directives for other judicial officers to pause and consider some of the stereotypes that they have said you need to desist from, and that these are stereotypes, these are myths, which actually first cause this kind of sexual violence partly, and then once again re-victimize the woman and deny her right to justice. For instance, one of the directives that has now been given is courts should desist from expressing any stereotype opinion in words spoken during proceedings or in the course of a judicial order to the effect that women are physically weak and need protection. Men are the head of the household. Women should be submissive and obedient according to our culture. Good women are sexually chaste. Women should, being alone at night or wearing certain clothes make women responsible for being attacked. As we know, there's this whole narrative about she asked for it. A woman consuming alcohol, smoking, etc., may justify unwelcome advances by men or has asked for it. Testimonial evidence provided by women who are sexually active may be suspect. Women are emotional and often overreact or dramatize events, etc. So here we have a judicial acknowledgement that these rape myths, these stereotypes about women are go to the heart of her to assessing her credibility and therefore re-victimize and deny her justice. And that is today become an issue of challenge and is a subject which the judiciary itself is increasingly becoming conscious of. And I think those are the kind of changes that we need to see to move forward.